Thank you so much, Mutinta, for accepting our invitation. To be honest, you were on my radar for quite a while now. If you remember, while we were in Zimbabwe, I mentioned to
Yeah.
you that we need to have a small conversation just to get to know you more, to introduce you to the larger AFSA community. The reason why we started the Voice of AFSA newsletter, as you know, is many people think AFSA, they know it's the largest civil society in Africa,
Mm.
but they don't
Mm.
know who's really driving this movement.
Yeah.
AFSA is not the secretariat, AFSA is its members, and the members also have their own networks. They also have their own members. So it's a huge movement and platform by itself. So we thought to really try to spotlight members, their work, not only the organization, but the people behind the
Mhm.
organizations, the personalities. So I'm so happy that we're having this conversation representing ZAB. We'll have a discussion about you as a person,
Yeah.
just to try to know you more, then we can
Right.
discuss about the organization, ZAB, a little bit more, maybe a little bit more about AFSA too, the kind of involvement that you have in AFSA as an organization. And I would also like to pick up your mind on agroecology and food sovereignty movements in Africa. Maybe speak a little bit about my Food is African campaign and your message to the young African generation that's really picking up this movement and taking it forward. So thank you so much for accepting us. Thank you so much for making the time for us, dear. Okay, so my first question for you is, who is Mutinta? Just give us a background about who you are, your childhood, your families, your parents, the early days. Then we can
Yeah.
start building on that story.
Thank you so much, Copperbelt. And, I'm so grateful for this opportunity to highlight some of the things that we do and what I've achieved, both as an organization and as an individual. First of all, I was born and raised on the Copperbelt province in Zambia. My parents have retired and they've settled on the Copperbelt. My father used to be to work in the Ministry of Agriculture intuitively, and yeah, we used to grow a lot of vegetables growing up. I remember going into the garden to water as young as maybe 5, 6 years old. I was already watering plants. So I have grown up, in agriculture basically. But typically my parents, they've grown up with the conventional way of farming. I went to school. I went to a secondary school that is run by the Catholics. It's called the Benga Girls Secondary School, one of the best schools in the country.
Hmm.
And then I studied, my first qualification actually was in agriculture education. I was supposed to be a teacher
Wow.
of
Yeah.
agriculture science, never taught law because I
Yeah.
hated standing in front of the pupils. So I opted to join the NGOs and, yeah, and then I studied economics and economic policy management. So, here I am. That's about me. When I started, the first job that I got,
Yeah.
and that was before I got my degree, after I just got my diploma in agricultural education. My
Hmm.
first job I used to ride a bicycle
Wow.
in the hills. There's a place in Kachue that is quite hilly, and I used to ride a bicycle. It was more like extension, but under the Cooperative League of the United States of America, which was CRUSA then, and
Hmm.
it was actually a very green revolution, giving loans to farmers and teaching them how to grow crops and stuff like that. And then from there, I worked for Hodi. It was a local organization. I was a program manager for one of the very rural areas, one of the most rural area in this country. And I was sponsored by ActionAid for a child sponsorship program where we ran different, programs. And then I worked for Oxfam, and now I am with the Zambia Alliance for Agroecology and Biodiversity.
Yeah. So you're not from the capital city, Lusaka.
Yes, yes. Now I live in the capital city. I mean, our
Okay. Now
network
you're.
is,
Yeah. It's very interesting, to the kind of shift that you have from from the very beginning into to the kind of work that we are doing. So where is the entrance to this agroecology and food sovereignty movements? How do you become an activist for environmental causes? I
Mm,
can sense that this childhood upbringing has also a role in it. But when
yes.
do you really start believing that this might be your true cause, your true purpose?
Yeah. So even on my first job,
Mm-hmm.
we were amongst the first people to introduce conservation farming to the farmers. So conservation farming, of course, with a component of loans, conventional seeds and fertilizers and chemicals and stuff like that. But for me, from the word go and
Mm-hmm.
from my first job, I was really interested in understanding what it means to have environmental sustainability. And over time, my thinking evolved. Somewhere around 2017, when I left Oxfam and I started doing work, I became a consultant. I used to do my own consultancy work. And that is the time when I really began to understand because most of my consultancy was civil society organizations that were working in agriculture,
Mm-hmm.
both the ones that are proponents of agroecology and those that are doing working with farmers with conventional under conventional farming. So it was really for me that was the entry point. I would say 2017 kind of opened my eyes. By 2019, I was really interacting with farmers and civil society organizations that were dealing with seeds as well, farmers' rights. So
Mm.
I began to understand these issues clearly around 2017 because then I just realized, after doing a few consultancy assignments with these organizations that this is where I needed to be. So I knew exactly what I wanted and I took interest in understanding what environmental sustainability entails, food sovereignty, issues of farmers' rights, issues of, health in relation to food, nutrition, and all that. So my learning around food sovereignty, agroecology, farmers' rights has just been compacted in the last 7 years. Yeah.
Yeah, Yeah, okay, okay, for most, most Africans, when they join, big international NGOs like Oxfam, ActionAid,
Mm.
it's really difficult to pull ourselves out and start building from, local civil society organizations or be part of the movement. So, was it a big decision for you, or?
Well, let me say yes and no. Yes, in the
Yeah.
sense that I was leaving an organization, like you said, that is international, and
Mm,
yeah, there's always this uncertainty. But
yeah.
no, in the sense that I didn't have a choice.
Yeah.
So Oxfam had been transitioning every time, these transitions, and eventually the position that I was holding, which was grants compliance, officer, it was kind of phased out. So yeah,
Yeah.
so whether I was ready or not, I had to jump out and be on my own. So there was that apprehension, but at the same time, I think I was really geared because the moment I stepped out of there, I already knew where to go. I
Yeah.
had already decided that I was going to do a bit of consultancy, and it
Yeah.
did work out quite well.
Yeah. So most of your consultancies were really focused on, the food systems or environmental sustainability issues,
Not really. My
or was it really
consultancies were
diverse? Yeah.
more around actually.
I mean, yeah.
Yeah, so evaluations, assessments, and things
Yeah.
like that. But somehow I always found myself with these organizations that were doing a lot of work around food systems and yeah, farmers' rights.
That is how the universe is calling you, preparing you
Exactly.
to.
It called to me actually.
That was a cool, yeah. So tell us a little bit more about, how you joined ZAAB, what ZAAB is, for our audiences who doesn't know ZAAB, Zambian Alliance for Agroecology and Biodiversity.
Yeah.
Tell us about the process, the journey, and your position now
Yeah. So I joined ZAAB. Yeah. So I did a few consultancies again for ZAAB.
for
It
ZAAB. Yeah.
was one of the organizations that I carried out some work for, and I was really, really interested in what they are doing. So there was this time when there was an advert for a position for the national coordinator, and I knew that I wanted to be in that space. not only because I knew I could do it, but because I knew that I was going to learn a lot more from being in that space.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I started working with ZAAB in 2021, and I'm now the national coordinator. And it's been an amazing journey because I've learned a lot. I have found myself in spaces that have built my capacity, my understanding, and also in spaces where I've contributed with passion,
Yeah.
what I believe in and the things I feel like I should have been in space earlier. Yeah.
Yeah.
And about the organization, the Zambia Alliance for Agroecology and Biodiversity is a network, or like the name says, it's an alliance, it's a network of civil society organizations, a few individuals, some institutions that are working in the food system, that are working on food systems. But we also have institutions that are working in research and individuals that are interested just in learning. We
Hmm.
have currently we have 37 members, CSOs,
Yeah.
and 6 individuals, 2 institutions that are associate members. So we are growing. I joined this when I joined ZAB, we had 15 members. We're at
You
37
almost.
now,
Yeah.
and we have yeah, we do have quite a lot in terms of what we offer to the members. So I guess that's why we are growing.
Yeah. How is their composition? Where their different sectors that they came from, your members, are they only farmers organizations, or those who are working on food and agriculture issues, or are they also from academia? The different.
So we have academia. Academia
Okay.
are normally applying as associate members. We work with them, but they are not full-time members.
Mm-hmm.
Most of our members are civil society organizations, mostly
Mm.
local civil society organizations, but currently we've had interest in international organizations joining. So ActionAid, for example, was our member, and they're trying to renew now. We've also had interest from ADRA, which is the Adventist, Development and Relief Aid Organization, and so many others. So mainly, and then we have individuals, most of them that have shifted from being in the organizations that are our members. And
Mm.
when their positions change and they move to other institutions, or if they find themselves on their own, they still opt to remain part of the network. So those join under individual membership. That is the main composition. Yeah.
Yeah, once you join, this kind of movements, or big organization, it's more like a family thing. You just cannot
Yes.
live. Yeah, they live
Yeah.
it
And that's up, I
completely.
think. Yeah.
Yeah. That's really interesting to know. So, what are the activities that ZAAB is involved in Zambia, and how well known is ZAAB in policy
Mm.
environments in Zambia? Just give us a national picture to really understand what ZAAB is and how it's impacting, whether it's policy or really actually shifting the transition towards agroecology on the ground.
Yeah, so ZAB is really focused on, influencing the transition to agroecology, like the name says, Zambia
Yeah,
Alliance for Agroecology and Biodiversity. So
yeah.
it
That's,
is,
by the way, one of the things that I really love about ZAB is from the get go, from the name of the
yes,
organization, it's very clear,
and
direct,
that is
it's agroecology.
2010, by the way. Yeah,
Yeah.
2010 when agroecology was not even a topic of discussion then. So it is really interesting that we are very well known in Zambia, at least
Hmm.
among civil society organizations and to the government. HUB is one of the organizations that is recognized as a key stakeholder in the food systems. We have been the only organization that provided input like extensive critique to the development of the comprehensive agriculture transformation support program, which is our current NAIP 2, which was only launched last year. We are also the only ones that mounted a campaign around the no to GMO. That is when the
Yeah.
policy was being developed to change it so that law can allow Zambia to receive living genetically modified organisms. we are the only organization again that has really campaigned against Zambia joining the International Union for the Protection of New Varieties of Plants, UPOV, which is something that Zambia is intending to do currently. And we
Yeah.
have also been relevant to the extent that ZAAB sits on currently the National Technical Working Group on the development of the National Agroecology Strategy. We sit on the
Hmm.
National Biodiversity Committee, which is really big here in Zambia because we are developing, actually almost all countries are reviewing and developing their national biodiversity action plans and
Yeah.
strategies and action plans, the NBSAPs. So we
Yeah.
sit on that committee and we seconded 3 of our members to sit on that committee and they've been ratified. So we have ZAAB Secretariat and we have 2 other members of the network actually sitting on that committee and influencing what the next NBSAP will look like. We are also participating extensively in the development of other policies such as the nationally determined contributions, the
Contributions. Yeah.
national adaptation plans, and also the climate change policy, which is now being tabled as the climate change bill in Parliament. We have also participated extensively and given critique and extensive feedback to the bills that are related to seed, that is the Seed Bill of
Yeah.
2024 and the Plant Breeders' Rights Act Bill of 2024 as well. We are recognized as a key stakeholder and even in communications, we are being included by the Seed Control and Certification Institute in Zambia. So I can say that we are really
No, you're
pretty
doing
well known,
amazing.
and
Yeah.
we are in a certain niche where we are the sub members are probably the only ones that are recognizing these changes and being proactive about responding to them.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. The for me, the one of the most interesting thing to me is when people in government, people or policymakers understood the identity of an organization. So whenever they try to do some, a big agriculture framework or policy, or whether it's a policy on biodiversity, climate change, if ZAB came to their mind to give them some contributions, to give some insights and
yeah,
involve them in the process, that's a huge space to be at. And how well do the government people take your advocacy efforts? Is it not so many African countries, the relationship between civil societies and governments are not really, you know they don't see eye to eye in most of places. This is our space, it's our job. It's not the
exactly,
civil
exactly.
societies.
They are not called technocrats for no reason. They are really
Yeah.
technocrats.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I would say that there is some good and then there's some bad. So there's some bad in the sense that there is quite a lot of pushback, but
Yeah.
there's also good in the sense that, for example, when we were contributing to the development of the national biosafety policy, the review
Hmm.
rather, the current
Yeah.
one that we were so opposed to,
Mm.
our submissions have been included in the final text. We didn't get exactly what we wanted, which was to basically squash it completely. But we did get, first of all, we got to introduce the precautionary principle and then the liability and redress principle, which they had thrown out. Imagine a
It's a
whole
big one.
biosafety. Yeah, it was
Yeah.
really big. And a few other
Yeah.
texts in there that were around ensuring that we protect the environment, we protect the people that will be exposed or people that
Yeah.
might be or communities that might be impacted by the introduction of living genetically modified organisms.
Hmm.
Also, during the development of the CASP was being validated in 2023.
Hmm.
And at the validation, some of the text that was being debated, that was being included on the last day of validation, something that we had submitted, I think, a few days before that validation, was included in that validation. So some of that text was part of the deliberations on the final. So we know that they do take us seriously, and also, and so another example is the PBR bill that we are talking about, the most recent one. So during the stakeholder consultations of the PBRB, we have given very extensive comments, including in-text comments to the text of in the bill, but also our own policy briefs that we have written and all that. And during one of the meetings when we were called by the Seed Control and Certification Institute with the Community Technology Development Trust, CTDT, we managed to get two of the articles actually changed before it can go to the next phase of the stakeholder validation, because that was there was one national level validation in Lusaka, and then they said they will take it to the provinces after that one. So after that one, we had Article 8, which has to do with farmers' rights. We asked that it be reinstated as it was, and we got a response from the SCCI that it was going to be reinstated with all the farmer privileges in there. And Article 12, which had to do with national interest. So under national interest, it had really been narrowed down to only nutrition and food security
Food
as national
security,
interest.
calories.
Yeah, so knowing that there would be issues around GMOs and all these, we insisted that issues around environmental protection be reinstated as it is in the current act. That includes, like a variety would be withdrawn if it impacted the environment or if it led to certain detrimental impacts either to the farmer or to the environment. So national interest now became more expanded under Article 12. And that is the draft now that is undergoing regional validation. That is being subjected to stakeholder consultations in the provinces. So we know
Yeah,
that because of our extensive knowledge and the approach that we take, we are taken seriously by the government. Yeah.
it's amazing. It's really amazing to me to learn that it's not only one policy issues that you're tackling. It's really, really diverse.
Yes.
From seeds to biodiversity to agriculture to climate change,
Yeah.
any disease, naps, then it's almost everywhere. To be honest, on policy issues in Zambia that's related to agriculture, food systems, and biodiversity and climate change.
Yeah.
One thing that maybe I want you to elaborate more is on the agroecology strategy, the national agroecology strategy. How is it unfolding? Is it already finalized or is it on the process? Who initiated the process? Just give us some background for our audiences to understand the agroecology strategy of Zambia.
Yeah. So the National Agroecology Strategy, which we are calling the NAS, was initiated by a number of civil society organizations,
Hmm.
including ZAAB, but it's being led by Pelam Zambia. So Pelam Zambia has been the key government contact, and we have been supporting the work in the background. And like I said, we sit on the National Technical Working Group, where government is the chairperson for that technical working group, and Pelam is like secretariat
Yeah,
of the technical working group. In terms of how far we have gone, we have done some analysis, mostly at national level. So with the support from GIZ, there has been a consultant that's been hired to develop the framework, more like the skeleton of the
yeah,
strategy. Government provided the template for the strategy, and the consultant is I think he's done working on the skeleton of the draft uh,
policy.
agroecology strategy, and I'm sure that the next week or so we are going to have the first draft of the strategy. The interesting thing about this strategy is that it is coming at a time when so many other policies are being changed and developed, and we didn't expect that government would actually say yes, now we could go ahead and develop this, because everything else that has been developed in the last 3, 4, 5 years has been really focused on the same thing, same business as usual kind of models, which is the green
Yeah,
revolution kind of agriculture. But this is a departure from what we normally do, and the fact that government themselves have chosen to take a lead in this is a really big positive step for us
yeah.
as a consortium. Yeah.
Yeah. To be honest, Mutinta, one of the things that I'm really optimistic about is, not everything that we wanted has to be there in terms of, the exact
Exactly.
amount of wordings and everything. It's always negotiation, it's always give and take.
Hmm.
But one of the things that I stress most is, are we seeing progress? It's the progress in the journey that gives you, some hope and optimism to push more and more. So how do you, from what I see, engagement from the government side, the understanding about agroecology from government side is increasing.
Mm.
It's across
Yes.
Africa. Is most of the conversations that I had so far. Most people are telling me, especially when they compare it from where it was when they started and now, more people has started talking about agroecology,
Mm.
as a just a way to transform their food systems to ensure, nutrition and culture, protect their seeds, protect, defend their food system. So, can we say the same about Zambia? Do you see this kind of change in governments?
Yes, I think there
Okay,
is quite a few, major changes that are taking place. One of them is the government technocrats that are sitting on the technical working group that is developing the NAS are actually very keen on learning and understanding exactly what we mean by agroecology. And you can see that over time they have become our allies. Yeah, you can say that they've become our allies. They are really, really determined to see this come to fruition. So we expect that even amongst higher decision makers, this will trickle down. But we have also been very deliberate ourselves about engaging them, starting from the members of parliament who represent constituents where they're coming from, to chiefs who are the local leaders here. Chiefs play a very big role in Zambia because
very,
they have a very big influence on the people that they lead. To so many other leaders in different spaces, we have been quite proactive. The other thing is there's also an increase in, people are admitting just in January, I think somewhere around December or January, we had one of the permanent secretaries in the Ministry of Agriculture admit that the chemicals that are being used to kill the four armyworms are actually quite a lot. And then government is beginning to fail to afford to give this to all the farmers. And he was encouraging that farmers be taught, biological ways of combating the
yeah,
fall armyworm, which is really troubling us here in Southern Africa,
yeah,
when in the case of maize. So you can see that yes, there is not just increase in knowledge, but also an acknowledgement that the system is failing.
yeah. Yeah, that's great. Maybe before we close this, dialogue on policy issues, maybe one thing that I really want to ask you is about the seed, advocacy work. I know you're
Yeah.
too passionate about it, and ZAAB is spearheading most of the advocacy work. The campaigns on UPOV and FMSS is a most important one. So, where do you see the farmers manage these systems? Where are you pushing FMSS? Is it on agroecology strategy, or does it have a specific avenue that you're pushing this along with saying no to UPOV, no to GMOs campaign?
Yes. So the FMSS for us is something that we are working on alongside all the other things. We know that
Hmm.
when we talk about no to GMO, we are saying we do not want the GMOs. We are basically saying yes to FMSs. When we say no to what we are talking about FMSs, but we are not just looking at it from the opposite point of view, from the negative point of view, which is the UPOVs and the GMOs. We are also looking at it from the positive point of view, which is promotion
Mm.
of farmer managed seed systems. So there's a lot of work now going on around multiplication, seed sharing, conservation, and everything else that goes into FMSS. And most of our members, let me just say that all of our 37 organizations are really, really interested in the seed work.
Seed
Plus
work.
the other partners like Pelam Zambia is not a member of ZAAB, but we partner on almost every activity. There are also other organizations that are just partners with SAB, and this is a message that has really gone wide, and a lot of organizations and farmers have gone flat out wanting to revive their own seeds. but we are also looking at it in terms of building the capacity, lighting these fires, and using thanks to the funding from AFSA, from
Yeah.
ZAAB through AFSA, we piloted something last year where we had to go to two different districts and build the capacity of people there to articulate these issues and then make them decide on how they start on one, seed saving, and two, spreading agroecology. And we called it the lighting of fires. And you could see that these fires that we lit have really spread. They are really
Yeah.
burning, especially the one in Kalongo in Southern Province, and you can see people are really interested. So we have now, as a result of this support, we have now found a model that will really work. And we know that work on
Yeah.
the ground is much more
Yeah.
important in providing the evidence, in consolidating what we are talking about, than if we keep talking at national level.
Yeah. Yeah. So this is a good entrance for us to really deal with some of my questions about AFSA.
Yeah,
As you know, that's where AFSA's work become more important, because gathering all these voices nationally with national networks, really going deep to local civil society organizations who are working on the ground to collect all those voices and to bring it to the continental level, to the international level, is a space that AFSA is really working at along with its members. So, when do you know when did this partnership with AFSA started, and which working group are ZAAB actively participating on? Are you on the climate and seed, or is it across all the four working groups?
yeah. So ZAAB has been, got interested in working with AFSAs way back as 2020. I
Mm,
think we formalized that partnership in 2021. And ZAAB sits on participates in three of the working groups, which is the seed working group, where we are
yeah,
chair, yes,
yeah,
and currently I sit on the citizens working group, and also the newly approved youth group. I know that we have one of our Sarah O'Malley sitting on the
yeah,
youth working group. That makes it three. Our work with AFSA for us has really been interesting. And what
yeah,
interested us in joining AFSA is the fact that we have our local network, and we felt that we needed to not only work at national level but also escalate our voice to the continental level, to the region, and then the continental level. And AFSA offers that kind of platform. We also felt like we had a lot to benefit from other organizations, other networks, and
yeah,
lessons in other countries, in other regions of Africa. So right now, I can say that we are connected to East Africa, like I am here now because of work with AFSA. We are connected to North, to Central and West Africa, all through the work of AFSA, and we are getting lessons. We are getting to understand the continental perspective of the work that we are doing. But what is important, most important for us, is the fact that we realize that Africa is one, and Africa as a whole needs to support this transition at the same time. Because when one is down, then we are going to we still don't we will not still achieve our objectives. So the challenges that we face are the same: the corporate capture of our food systems, the depleting soil, the depleted soils, the environmental degradation that comes with extensive use of chemicals and a commercial agriculture which clears large tracts of land, the
yeah,
issue around extractives, the issues around human rights, and all that, which we hope agroecology, which we know agroecology intends to resolve,
yeah,
can only be resolved collectively as a continent, and also as with standing with one voice. So this is what, for us, this is the motivation for joining AFSAF and for remaining within the Alliance for Food Sovereignty in Africa, because we are very concerned about the trends that had started more than 60 years ago, and we have reached a crossroads. In my view, we have reached a crossroads now where we have to make a decision between continuing with what we've been doing and getting negative results, or transitioning and trying to reverse or go back to where we used to flourish as
yeah,
a continent.
yeah. Okay, okay, it's really interesting, Mutinta. If when we say it is, okay, the problem that one country has in Africa is almost exactly the same to other realities, to other communities. It's just geography is a demarcation. The boundaries
Exactly.
are only there, but the problem, the challenge is as a continental level. Even our new members from North Africa, Tunisia, Algeria,
Mm,
we will really you'll be surprised that the same kind of issues that they're dealing with, the issue
yeah,
of battling and defending their food systems, their seed systems,
exactly.
is their soils, like you said, it's almost the same everywhere. So like I always say, when our voices are scattered, it's noises, but the loudest
Yes,
voice is when the voices are came together in the speaker one. A
then it's more
unified voice
coherent.
is the loudest one. So we
Yeah.
are hopeful that we are really making an impact, for continental policy issues, international policy issues that are supporting smallholder farmers in Africa.
Mm.
What, if I ask you, if someone asks you in Zambia or in Africa, why are you pushing for agroecology or food sovereignty? Can you articulate that in terms of the local context as a Zambian? Why are you pushing agroecology could be the best bold solutions to transform Zambian food systems to?
So one of the things for me, the most interesting thing about agroecology and the African continent is the biodiversity. One thing that we are losing as a result of our current food systems is the diversity in terms of not just the domesticated food, but also the wild plants and
Yeah,
mushrooms and insects that we depend on as food as Africans. But also the loss of biodiversity, natural biodiversity that we don't use for food, the
mm,
forests, the streams, the rivers, everything that we know, that made our continent beautiful and green, and with all the traditional medicine that you find in the bush is going because of our current food system. And food systems cut across a lot of sectors and subsectors, including what we do in you can't talk what people do in nutrition, what people do in other just other sectors. So
health.
one of the
Yeah,
things that we are losing is the natural biodiversity, but also the biodiversity that we use as food. We The other reason why we are advocating for agroecology is that we need to go back to our food systems that worked for us. We have food systems that work for us that were based on agrodiversity, that were based on maintaining the environment around which somebody is doing their agricultural activity, that were based on local markets and local systems that were integrated and also supportive of the smallholder farmer.
yeah,
The other reason is that Africa is the most impacted by climate change. And we despite investment, huge investment in so-called climate change programs, including climate smart agriculture,
yeah,
including conservation farming, we have seen that the impacts are just getting worse and worse, and we are still losing our natural biodiversity and still getting we are not still getting justice for for all this that is happening. We are the least contributors to climate change, but we are the most impacted, and yet there is nothing that equalizes this injustice. So as a result, what we need is a system that is locally based, a system that is centered around ourselves as Africans, and a system that utilizes the indigenous knowledge that we know worked in the past and integrates it into modern technology, a system that we know is sure to mitigate and also mitigate against climate change, promote resilience, and regenerate our environment. We also have a case against the green revolution system, which has not worked for Africa, despite again huge investments in hybrid seeds, including GMOs in some countries like South Africa. hybrid seeds, GMOs, fertilizers, these commitments, the CADIP commitments of increasing fertilizer by so much, by what year. For most African countries, they increased the
Yeah.
fertilizer use. Zambia, by the way, at the time of the biennial review for the CADIP, had exceeded their commitment to increase fertilizer use.
The fertilizer.
But we are still one of the hungriest countries in the world. So that alone gives you these dynamics why we should think of a different system, why we should look at alternatives that deliver, that are sure to deliver on climate change adaptation and resilience, on
Yeah.
food and nutrition, biodiversity, regeneration, and so many other aspects. We also have the issue of the loss in agro biodiversity, which is related to nutrition and also identity. So the Green Revolution has led us on a path of which is a monocultural path, where we are so focused on a few crops, a number of crops. It's mainly maize, soybeans, for some wheat, cotton, sunflower,
Yeah.
and a few other crops that are indigenous to specific countries. But what this has done for us is it's taking away what we consider as food, what contributes to food security at household level, nutrition at household level, but also the identity of who we are as a people. I keep telling people when we are doing this My Food is African campaign that look, one day you wake up and realize that you have not just lost this pumpkin leaves, we call it chihuahua. You have not just lost the chihuahua as the physical form of chihuahua. You will lose even the indigenous knowledge or the knowledge that comes with one, its production, its preparation, its conservation, its preservation, and all that. And it will be a sad day because we use this for some of the key events, like the traditional ceremonies, like when people are getting married, they have in the Bemba culture, they have what is they call Langamulilo, where the woman's family cooks this variety of food. And this, there would be like 20, 50 dishes of different foods, both wild and domesticated foods
Yeah.
that we eat. And imagine one day you wake up and you can only find five of those, or six, or even two of those, because even when that food continues to exist, for example, if it's in the wild,
Yeah.
the indigenous knowledge related to it on how it should be prepared, how it should be preserved, it's gone. So we are not just losing all this, we are also losing ourselves as a people. And
Yeah.
agroecology is one sure way of taking us back to who we were, and reclaim our identity as Africans.
Yeah. It's what a beautiful way of really explaining this to us, Mutinta. I'm really, really, moved by it. To be honest with you, the
I am
fact
very
that
passionate about My
I
Food is
I, I
African.
I
So
can tell. I mean, it's such a profound explanation, and I completely relate to it too. Well, once in around 2010 or 11, if I remember, I was having a conversation with one of the most respectable, honorable agriculture thinkers in Ethiopia. I'm not sure if you know Dr. Ragasa.
yeah,
He was telling me about I was asking him about the 2008 food crisis, international food crisis, and he said, "No, it's not a food crisis; it's a diversity crisis."
yeah,
Whenever we
that's very
in
true.
Africa, no matter what happens to maize or this or that, for these crops, one or two, three crops, we can survive. Our diversity, our food diversity is so immense, so big that we can manage this kind of maneuvers, resilience to really,
Exactly,
survive those bad days. That's how
exactly.
we survive.
That's
Yeah,
what somebody said about the drought we had in
exactly.
2023 to 2024.
Yeah,
They said this is not a crop failure. This is a case of maize failure. And it was. And it
it
was
was.
nationwide.
Yeah,
And one crop fails and the whole country goes hungry.
yeah,
How?
yeah.
You know?
And there was another study in London. If a plane, if something happens, it's during the volcanic eruption in maybe in Southeast Asia, one of the
Mm,
countries. All the flights were forced to not take off. So all the imports, food imports that used to come to,
Oh,
London, they were saying, some studies were saying, if this continues for 2 more weeks, we might have experienced a total starvation of the entire community
no,
there, because
that's
we
because they are
totally
not growing
depend,
their own
our
food.
foods on the imports.
Yeah.
So okay, that's why, when you said that our solution has to be centered on our own local contexts, based on our
Yeah.
own African knowledge systems. We have a lot inside, but we have not have that paradigm shift to try to focus inward and explore what we
Mm.
have and as an alternative. So it's a very profound way of expressing it. So, what do you think is the challenge? Can we speak a little bit more about why do you think that we're having a struggle to explain these very simple things to the governments enough for them to start looking? Oh, can this also be a solution? Not only industrial agriculture or these chemicals and fertilizers.
Yeah. The first thing that I'll say is sometimes we get in the spaces where government people are and they laugh at us and say, so, every time there's new, these kind of terms, food sovereignty, agroecology, for climate smart. And so, yeah, one of the things is we need to be more believable, both in demonstrating that agroecology works
Hmm.
and also in being consistent, both in terminology and in our messaging. There was a lot of hype around conservation agriculture, which in Zambia, like I said, I was one of the people that were the first pioneers of conservation farming. In Zambia, it really never took. It worked for some time, but it never really took off. And then we moved to climate smart and now something else. So we need to be consistent and we need to be believable. We need to
Now is
demonstrate.
nature based.
Yeah, yeah, now there's nature days. So all these things have to, they have to congregate at some point. They have to meet, and we are defining agroecology the same way in Ethiopia, the same way in Zambia, the same way in Uganda and everywhere else. That is the only way we're going to be believable. But also, we are also demonstrating, we are showing that this works. There is work on the ground in Ethiopia, in Zambia, in Kenya, everywhere. There is landscapes that can demonstrate that, look, this was like this and now it's like this. And these are the incomes that people are getting. This is the diversity that they are harvesting from this place. We need more of that work. It's a challenge.
Yeah.
The second challenge that we have is the lobby groups. Of course, we know that this is a fact that there are lobby groups from the other side, the private sector, the multinational corporations and their sponsors. Everybody knows that there's so much money that is not just being put in developing technologies, but also exchanging hands for these policies and programs to be implemented in our countries. We need For me, I always insist that some of these we need to call them out from where they are coming from. Through CAFOD, we wrote to the World Bank about their stipulation in one of the projects, the grants that is being given to Zambia under the Example project about Zambia aligning their seed laws to UPOV. And they wrote back and they said, oh, we didn't know that, no, this was going to contradict what Zambia has signed up to. We are going to engage the relevant people to see how this aligns to, because we pointed out that Zambia signed up to the international treaties, Zambia ratified the GBF and
Yeah.
all that. And, UPOV contradicts some of the provisions in those.
Yeah.
And yeah, so you could see that they really didn't have an explanation for us, but they said that they didn't understand from our government side that that was going to contradict those provisions. So basically throwing it back to us. So we need to start calling them back, calling it back from where it is coming from. I'm really convinced that our biggest challenge is these lobby groups and their sponsors. And thirdly, the other challenge is the brainwashing that has happened over a long period of time. Just last week, I was telling somebody that, we've come from far and we still have a long way to go back. When you have been walking, suppose in a day you feel like, oh, I'm going to exercise, and then you exceed your usual distance that you walk or run, and then you start going back. That's when you feel the distance. So we
Yeah.
are feeling this distance because we have gone
Yeah.
too far. And then coming back is one, a daunting task because everybody is so unsure whether to just continue or to come back.
Yeah.
And then secondly, everybody's thinking, if we came from there, what would make it work if we went back?
Yeah.
But we are not going back with the same knowledge. We are going back with the lessons that we have learned
Yes.
along the way. We are
With
going back
experience.
with new technologies, with new information, and yeah, so it's possible. But that is the biggest challenge, and this
Challenge.
exists at all levels: the
Yeah.
farmer level,
Yeah.
the
Every.
technocrats, and decision makers. They fear. In Zambia, one of the key statements that they keep saying is we can't transition at the expense of production, at the expense of food security. And already that is a misconception because um, you expect that when people have transitions, then we would have more food. But there's the fear that if you let go, if I let go of the fertilizers and the pesticides today,
It
either
might get
gradually
worse.
or suddenly I'm
Yeah.
going to crash.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this is happening at all levels. The farmers are scared. The consumers are, are in between because they also don't know. The technocrats are also scared because for them it also has a political connotation. You have a failed system, a food system that is failing. It affects the fact that you whether you'll be elected or re-elected into power. Those are some of the things that so we need to overcome that fear, and the only way we can overcome that fear is working ourselves from the ground up by building the evidence, sensitizing, creating massive awareness around agroecology, and this conviction that it works has to come at a big price. The same way that we went our way, we need to come back.
Back.
Unfortunately, if you want
Yeah.
to go on food, to come back on food, there's no hiking.
Yeah. No,
Yeah,
lucky for Africa, we have not really gone that far, like the
yeah.
industrial, okay, the
No, for
Western.
our context, I think we have gone
We
very
can
far.
easily
They
reverse
were
it.
always like
Yeah,
that.
I know.
For our context, we have gone very far.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really true. Very interesting way of looking at it, to be honest, and that shows you the power of narratives.
Exactly.
How
Yeah.
persistent it was, and for how long it was, even how it was inculcated in our educational systems. The curriculums, the formal education. That's
Mm,
almost westernization of everything, not only agriculture but everything. It has its roots with colonialism, all these ways of thinking that we borrowed from outside as a true best way forward for most of our solutions are really becoming the problem and the challenge.
yeah.
And to fight that is really, like you said, it's a daunting job because the narrative is not really easy
Exactly.
to challenge. So we have to, because we always say as AFSA, we have to create our own narratives, not only being
Exactly.
viewed like we're only against something, but like you said, being
Yeah.
loud enough to say what we want. Now we don't want, we don't want Agra, we don't want this, we don't want this, but what do we
Yes.
want?
What
That's
is
a
the
new
alternative?
building a new narrative challenge.
Yes.
We'll take
But
that as
also,
yeah, yeah,
yeah, but also defining what is food to us. That one has to happen, particularly if we have to pass on this information, skills, and knowledge to the youths, to the future generations. We need to define what food is to us. Currently, food is anything that is cooked and placed on the table, sometimes not even cooked. So,
yeah,
our definition of food is really narrow right now. But in our context as Africans, our definition of food was very broad. A lot
yeah.
of things were food, is
Yeah.
food to us, and we need to go back.
Yeah, while we are at it, can we speak more about My Food is African campaign? And I'm particularly interested to know your message for the African news, for the Zambian news, because, like you
Mm,
said, there is an influx of, this big food coming to Africa. The fast food culture is really, really coming with force in Africa. And it's really damaging our health. It's not healthy. It's
yeah,
damaging our environment. It's really affecting the local producers or smaller farmers, their livelihood. It's impacting the local economies. Its impact is felt everywhere across the sectoral issues. So, how do we teach our young generations to come back to African traditional foods and convince them that their food is the best food in terms of nutrition and everything, and it's up to them to kind of modernize it probably. So what would your message be to African youth to embrace my food is African campaign and join this movement?
Yeah, so first of all, I'll start by saying that the youths are the majority in Africa
Okay.
and
Yeah.
they are the largest consumers. So if we have
Mm.
to take this message
Mm.
and we have to achieve impact, we need the youth on board because they need to be the ones that embrace our local food. Secondly, there's an organization that joined us recently as a member of ZAAB. It's called Families Are Nations, and we
Families
love
are
their
nations.
approach. Families Are Nations. We really love their approach because they consider the family as the first unit of intervention when looking
Right.
at how you effect change. So one of the things that we want to work with them on is how to target families, starting from where they congregate in churches and when I eat the African food in my home,
Yeah.
my children will
Will
automatically
eat. Yeah.
develop an affinity towards them. They'll like the food and they'll consider it food. But now our food is becoming to our youth, our food is an acquired taste. The way we say, oh, we never used to have apples in Zambia, by the way, when I was growing up. And up to now, I eat apples, but really they are not my favorite. They are an acquired taste to me.
Yeah.
For our children, apples are their food and whatever else. And then these other things like our wild foods are an acquired taste. And most of the time, they don't even have time to get to learn to eat them. So we
Yeah.
need to start from there. We need to start from the families. What are you feeding your youth on? What are your children eating? What do they know about the value of that food? And secondly, to the youths directly, if I have to speak to the youths directly, I would say that, look, you have a responsibility. One, ensure that you are healthy, ensure that your family, your future family, your current family and your future family are healthy, eating healthy food. You have a responsibility to ensure that the economy is healthy, the environment is healthy, and you have the responsibility to pass on the environment, the world, the earth, and the environment, the economy to the next generation. And the only way you can do that is if you do the right thing. Secondly, the youth need to understand that this transition is not for
Yeah.
us. It's not for the people that are old. It's not for the people that already have children. Because chances are that most of us already have the NCDs, the non-communicable diseases that we fear. Yeah, but they
Yeah.
have an opportunity.
Yeah. They have.
There's one lady called Laura Miti in Zambia who is an activist.
Hmm.
And one of the things that we learned from her as ZAAB was that when speaking to the youths, you need to appeal to something that will affect them in the future. And this is how we are framing our messages. So she ran a campaign on the debt
Hmm.
when Zambia's debt was really escalating
Yeah.
during the previous regime. It was obvious that despite that, the borrowing was not stopping. So she involved a lot of youth from the
They
universities
keep
and
on
all
adding
that.
on it.
And they had a slogan. They had a slogan to say that, we borrow now, you pay in future. So, that appealed immediately to their sense of the burden of responsibility on them in future. This is the same thing.
Yeah.
Debt is just one of them. I
Yeah.
think the youth need to understand that the burden of responsibility that will result from the health bills, from non-communicable diseases and others, the cleaning up of the environment, which will be necessary at one time, the looking for farmland that is depleted, production of food will get even more expensive. That burden is something that they need to understand, and it is being we are we are we are developing it now. It will be worse in the future when they have to take up responsibility. So for the youth, I would say that they need to get interested. They need to understand how the whole food system works and what is going to be left for them when they take over responsibility. So it is very, very important that they understand and
And it's a good
get on board.
business too in Africa.
Yes, yeah,
Nothing beats agriculture if they are really interested in agriculture.
Exactly.
That's where,
Exactly.
it's the largest employer in the continent, without a doubt, and you
And
would more
also,
likely be successful.
yeah.
Yeah.
But also adding to that is the fact that the multinationals and other foundations, for example, like the Bill Gates Foundation and all that, they saw that while people may stop using certain minerals and these extractives may die out over time
Mm.
and people may discover new minerals, people will never stop eating. That's why the new wars will be about food. And a lot of resources have been invested in ensuring that people take control of the food systems now so that they can make money in future,
Yeah.
lots and
Yeah.
lots of money in future. So we need to be very clear, the youths need to be very clear that there is opportunities for them to in future from food systems. There are opportunities for them to contribute positively to the development of their respective countries, but there are also opportunities for them to be the change
Yeah.
that make these that affects these changes in narrative going forward. That once the youth change this narrative, it means that going forward, that will be the narrative. Their children and their children's children will find this narrative. What we found as a narrative, unfortunately, is industrial agriculture feeds the world. Put more chemicals to get more yields, and then it stands per hectare. And someone was proposing that maybe we should start looking at this in terms of nutrition per hectare or nutrients per hectare rather than tons per hectare. If I grow 10 hectares of maize, it's a monocultural thing. I am happy because I'm going to sell that maize. I'm selling maize in order to buy maize through mini meal, through cornflakes, through so
Yeah.
many other. Doesn't even
Yeah.
make sense because we are eating the same thing over and over again, just in
Yeah.
different forms.
Yeah. Yeah, that's why one of the things that we do as AFSAs, is, really building this network of agroecological entrepreneurs from different African countries, and it's really building a momentum now.
Yeah,
There are many users in different countries all over Africa who are really starting new startups, agroecological entrepreneurs, and becoming successful. And then on our last meetings in Addis, they were even showcasing their products, their local organic products. That's really very promising and encouraging. Maybe getting close to the final one of my final questions before we close this discussions on agroecology, food sovereignty, policy issues. Maybe if you have some words or something to say, the donor communities or governments or the support system that we have internationally or nationally should look into supporting the agroecology movements in Africa, because as you know, the financial flows is really
yeah,
funding the system that has already failed. We have been trying this industrial agriculture for how many years, but we are still on the same place where we are still hungry, but really depleting the soil, the environment, and everything. We destroyed it, even limiting or destroying our capacity to feed us further. So when are we going to go back to our own solutions, and how do we get the support, the financial support? At the end of the day, we need this kind of supports, financial capacity supports, to really build the movement on the ground and help
yeah,
farmers
yeah,
transitions.
yeah. Just today, actually, there were conversations around how much is going to the transition, and compared to what is going to the conventional agriculture, it's like less than 10% that is dedicated towards the transitioning to
Wow.
agroecology, which is really sad.
Yeah.
But I think key in this is the fact that agroecological systems are centered around local systems. They are localized systems. This is
Mm.
why there should be more resources going towards agroecology. I'll give an example of Zambia.
Mm.
Zambia runs the Farmer Input Support Program, where farmers are supported through the subsidies and blah blah blah. And some of them have been on that subsidy program for 20 years. And when you ask them if anything has changed, nothing has changed for them. They've been at the same level. And yet, when you look at the people that provide the inputs, there are companies that have been formed from nowhere, just formed purely to supply inputs. And when the input season ends, they close and they open again when it's time to supply the input. And I keep telling the farmers that if I was given maybe even 5% of the contract of FISIP in 1 year, I would become a millionaire. Wow, you would remain at the same point. Why is it that? It's because the current system ensures that the money remains up there. It remains with the input suppliers, the transporters, the multinational organizations, the institutions that provide the seeds and the fertilizers, and some of the
Yeah,
local companies that now in Zambia are providing open pollinated seeds. To the farmer receives nothing, and therefore that subsidy only goes to enrich
goes to
private
the
entities,
sector.
private capital. So when this is our case for advocating for pushing resources towards agroecology, which is more localized.
Yeah,
Farmers will be able to develop their own system. They will be able to make their own farm organic fertilizers, probably grow their own seeds, propagate their own plant propagating materials and all that. Therefore, the resources, they benefit the smallholder farmer and the local communities much more than the conventional agriculture, which is heavy on procurement,
yeah,
and delivers very little in terms of output on the ground. So we need to, for me, that is a very big case for advocating for more input towards agroecology. The other reason is that industrial agriculture has been proven to be actually the key contributor to one of the highest contributors to greenhouse gas
yes,
emissions. And and also the leading contributor to the loss of biodiversity. But with agroecology, it is actually the opposite because one, carbon sequestration happens, which means you reduce on carbon emissions. At the same time, it promotes regeneration and rejuvenation of depleted ecosystems, thereby giving back the biodiversity that we are losing. So in terms of climate change, it's a win-win. In terms of supporting local communities and impacting the local communities, it is also a win-win situation. And these are the cases that, this is the case that we need to build for financing to go towards agroecology. At the same time, someone today spoke about the difference between what is going towards production, or rather the transition, versus what is going towards, the health bill, the global health bill. There is some, the gap is so big
big.
between what we are spending on health and what we are spending on producing the food that is making us sick. We need to look at all these things.
Yeah,
This system is making us sick. The influx of ultra processed foods
yeah,
and all that, they are cheap, yes, but it also touches on, waste disposal. You receive canned foods from other countries. You receive foods that is packaged to last months and months on the shelf. And in Africa, in most African countries, we don't have systems of disposal. In Zambia, we have this waste dump site that burns forever. It burns, just keeps burning. And there are people who live near it. Their children keep coughing all the time because we don't have a system for waste disposal. So all this that relates to industrial food systems versus agroecology, really, there is no comparison. It's like you're looking at an angel and the devil, and you're saying, look, the angel is this, but you keep saying we prefer the devil because we know him.
we're
The devil,
addicted to it. Yeah, yeah. That's really great. I always sometimes it becomes really, when you think about it, very difficult to completely understand. I always ask, what would be one activity that would have a domino effect. If we can get one thing right, so that we can get more things right. So we cannot
Mhm.
go solving the health issue, the environment issue,
Yeah,
that we cannot be everywhere. But if we get
exactly.
agroecology right, we have high chance of really positively impacting other sectors too
The
in
other,
terms of our
yes,
health and environment.
definitely,
So yeah,
definitely.
that's good. So one of the things that I want to do now is we have been very serious all this time. It becomes really depressing when you think about it. We always
Yeah, of
are
course.
good at speaking about the challenges that we have, the serious issues, but we often forget about the lighter issues, who we are, what brings us happiness or joy in our lives, because that's equally important too. So, what do you like to do in your spare time? How do you spend your day? For example, what does your one day looks like from when you
Mm.
wake up to the end? I know there are families and everything, but I also would like to know more about what makes you happy. What are the activities that are involved with
Mm.
other than this work, this serious, serious work?
So what makes me happy is actually being in natural environments. I love that.
Mm,
With in our modern world, we rarely find spaces that have trees, a stream flowing. We always have, we are always surrounded by concrete and the noises you can hear, vehicles and all that. So in my spare time, I have this piece of land
yeah,
in, I'm not even farming it yet.
yeah,
There's someone that lives there as a caretaker and I have a few goats and things
yeah.
like that. So I like going there
That's how we start. We start
to
from
unwind. I
yeah,
really like to just go and sit there and there's a stream. So I go to the stream and I like to listen to the water flow.
yeah,
Yeah, that is mainly what I do, but I also spend quite a lot of time at church. I am STA, so Saturday is like every Saturday you are there from morning to I serve as a
keeps you busy.
church clerk. Church clerks have a lot to do in our church because
Yeah,
you are basically the secretary of the church and you are working one day in a week. So everything that was pending during the week we do it on Saturday. So I spend quite a lot of time. I would say that one day of my life, one
yeah,
day of my week, I spend it at church. The other day, if I'm not on Sunday, if I'm not home with my children, I'm usually at the farm with them. I like
yeah,
hiking. The area
yeah,
that we have land at is hilly, so we go up the hill and down and just enjoying nature.
yeah.
So yeah, nothing much really. I'm not.
No,
I
that's a
don't have
lot. I
many
mean,
friends. I
compared
love.
to now that's a good start. To be honest, I've noticed that from you when we were in Zimbabwe. Going to the territorial markets, you're really very excited to learn more, speaking to
Yeah, yeah,
everyone, walking.
yes.
Even when I seem to be tired, and then look at you, you're still on that energy. And when are you going to get tired?
For me, like that was home. The whole place was
Yeah,
green that side, and yeah, it was really
yeah.
beautiful.
So do you still get a chance to cycle or swimming? You told me you love swimming when you were young.
Yeah, I love swimming.
Okay.
I rarely swim, unfortunately. I love swimming. I have a swimming pool at home, but I don't
Yeah,
swim. I rarely swim. I swim once a week, maybe
yeah,
once in a while, maybe twice a week,
yeah.
twice a month or so.
That's
Yeah,
good.
my kids are the ones that swim a lot. Yeah, not much going on there, but I do
Yeah.
love swimming.
I always ask at the final question. I always ask
Hmm.
people, like, what they like to be remembered for, their legacy. But you're too young to ask that questions. But instead, I
Oh
want to
my
ask.
gosh, you have no idea.
I want to know more about your vision. What do you really want to achieve? Let's say in 5 years or 6 to 10 years in
I think for
ZAAB
me,
or in Zambia or as a
yes.
person in your support system, in your community, whether it's church, your children.
So my vision 5 years from now is at least, and this year at church, by the way, we had the Global Youth Day. We
Hmm.
always have a Global Youth Day in a year, and it falls in March.
Hmm.
And this year's theme was One Community Transformed. And somehow I realized that is my dream as an individual. If I could live one community transformed to agroecology, that would
Yeah,
be, like
that's
for me, that would be the highlight. At organizational level, I hope to leave the organization in such a state that, we stop these fights against bad policies. 5 years
hmm
from now, we could be talking about having policies, systems, strategies, and programs in place that now we are supporting in terms of implementation, actualization, and everything. I think that would be the highest achievement for ZAB. It would be to to be in a policy environment
It's
that
true.
is totally enabling, and therefore we are just acting as complementary to what government is doing.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean, to that, one thing that I really want to say is really to say thank you properly. You're one of the leaders in AFSA that I have huge, huge respect for. I admire your energy. It's always so
thank you.
infectious. You're always so positive, and you're a joy and a fun to be with, to be honest. And I have a lot. I learned a lot even out of this conversation, and every time was the same. So thank you for accepting this. Having this conversation with us. I'm sure our members and the audience will learn more about Zambia, ZAAB, you as a person. That's our hope.
Yeah,
So thank you so much, Mutinta. Thank you.
thank you so much, Kerubel, and I keep learning from you. So much
Yes,
that I learn from you every day. I love your communications.
yeah.
I think AFSA is blessed to have you for communications.
Thank you.
And yeah, thank you to everyone at AFSA for the partnership that we enjoyed and the learning that we get from the Alliance. Thank you.
Awesome.